Thank you, Zane. And we have a splashy slide, right? Oh, this? Good morning, everyone. As Zane said, my name is Andy Ceperley, and I have the pleasure of serving as the project director for careers and employment here at University of Melbourne. And I have been here in Melbourne since January 2nd of 2013, so I'm still very much a new arrival and learning so much every day. But I'd been to Melbourne before. In fact, in 2011, nearly 2 years ago, I was part of a program review team that had the opportunity to spend a week here on campus and take a good, hard look at careers and employment across the University of Melbourne campus. As the Melbourne model took hold, and as there had been a great deal of change in the campus community, it was a good time to take stock of how career services were delivered. And so it was a pleasure to be part of that review team, and it's even more of a pleasure to be back here on campus for the next few years. When I was here in November 2011, I was able to reflect a little bit for a small group on something that I have been so passionate about for the last 25 years in my life, and that is higher education, especially higher education in the United States, because that's what I know and that's what I have grown to really appreciate and value and evangelize for, in spite of all the challenges in tertiary education in the US, and as I'm coming to find out, challenges that exist here in Australia as well. So I'd like to start by referencing a blog post that appeared in the Huffington Post just last week. A gentleman named Greg Lamont, who is an Oxford alumnus and is currently pursuing his master's degree in Melbourne's sister city in the US, Boston, at a university you may have heard of, Harvard. And Mr. Lamont writes this: "And so it began, as I sat in historic Memorial Hall for the Dean's welcome. 45 minutes with barely a breath as a break on how great every single one of us in the room was, how amazing, how fantastically diverse our class was, how individually and collectively our potentialities knew no bounds." He was a long way from Oxford, this Greg Lamont, where humility is the name of the game. Oxford, Lamont writes, was something to be whispered, mumbled over conversation. Sure, you were smart, but don't go getting above yourself. He goes on to reflect on Harvard's Welcome Week, and he writes this: "People nodded, some people cheered, others hollered as the crescendo of self-congratulatory felicitations trundled ever upwards towards echelons that Brits in the room had only read about. It was like being in the academic equivalent of a Baptist church. Welcome to higher education in the United States." Now, such was not always the behavior on Harvard Yard, because in fact, Harvard University was modeled after Oxford and Cambridge. Harvard College was founded in 1636 and named after an early benefactor. Its primary function was to train young men for the ministry. Years later, William and Mary came next in 1693 and focused on training lawyers, politicians, and Virginia gentlemen, planters. Students pursuing the ministry did not have to pay fees to go to school. In 1701, Puritan ministers had grown tired of what they called the liberal theology being preached at Harvard, and they founded Yale College, later called Yale University. In 1747, New Light Presbyterians set up the College of New Jersey. Any guesses what it became? Princeton University, recently ranked #1 in the United States. The Baptists started Rhode Island College, later named Brown University. The Church of England set up King's College in New York City, and it later became Columbia. It wasn't until 1749 in my hometown of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, that Ben Franklin and civic-minded leaders created the University of Pennsylvania, the first institution that was not oriented to the training of ministers. So if I were to summarize the first few centuries of higher education in the United States, I'd point out three things. Early tertiary education helped young men make the transition from rural farms to complex urban occupations. They promoted upward mobility by preparing ministers and community leaders. And over time, those that became the most elite institutions, we might call them the Ivy League, contributed little to upward social mobility, but educated the offspring of the wealthy and ministers and others who were significant personalities in the Northeastern elite. Much has changed in the last 300 years. Let's fast forward to today. In the United States, there are 4,495 degree-granting institutions. 2,774 of them are four-year institutions. 1,721 are two-year institutions. We call them community colleges. The approach was, is, and will likely be well into the future, highly decentralized in the United States. Private colleges and universities are largely self-sufficient, relying on tuition and endowments and research support and steady fundraising efforts. Public universities are administered solely by the individual states. Federal government has limited involvement in tertiary education in the United States, but does support higher education through grants, loans, and other forms of aid. Now, some of the state systems in the US are quite large. I spent the last 9 years at the University of California, one of the flagship systems in the United States. There are 10 University of California campuses. But there's two other state systems in California. The California state system boasts 23 campuses, and the California community college system, 109 campuses across the state of California. There's incredible diversity in the higher education landscape in the United States. I mean, if I take my own family as an example, it was assumed that my 3 older brothers and I would go to college. This was not to be discussed. This was not something to be debated. The question was not where, but when we would earn a college degree. I think of my oldest brother, Tim, who started his college career at Dickinson and quickly joined a fraternity and partied his way through 4 years. He went on to a Master's in Foreign Service program at Georgetown University and eventually a law degree at Loyola University, Los Angeles. 2 other brothers, Jeff and Jim, identical twins, did everything together. They went to college together at a small faith-based institution called Geneva College outside of Pittsburgh. They went into the Army together, and they received complete funding after 3 years of service in the Army to go to medical technology school at Thomas Jefferson in Philadelphia. And then I think about my own trajectory. My parents did not want me to move away from home. Growing up in suburban Philadelphia, I had few options. One of those options, and the option I choose to pursue, was Drexel University in Western Philadelphia, known for its 5-year co-op program, where you spend half of your time in class and half of your time serving in an internship or a cooperative education endeavor. I needed to grow up, though, so I dropped out of Drexel, much to the dismay of my parents, took 6 months off, moved to Los Angeles, got a job at Universal Studios Tour, and eventually came to my senses and returned to the academy. but not to Drexel University. I needed some distance. I needed to learn how to do my laundry. I needed to learn how to cook a meal. I needed to learn how to take care of myself. And so I transferred to a major land-grant institution in Virginia, Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, affectionately known as Virginia Tech. Go Hokies, as we say. I went to graduate school at the University of Virginia in the beautiful college town of Charlottesville, the arch rival of Virginia Tech. And it was at the University of Virginia, following my graduate degree, that I had the wonderful opportunity to start a career in career development, something that I've been passionate about ever since, because I loved this idea then, as I do now, of being a liaison between life as a student and all of the possibilities that can come next. Since my time at UVA, I've had the chance to move around a fair amount, and from Charlottesville, had the opportunity to move to one of the largest institutions in the United States, and perhaps one with about the biggest ego, and that is the University of Texas at Austin. Now, unlike the University of California system, where you have 10 campuses that kind of are part of a gentle sibling rivalry, when you're in the University of Texas system, it's all about the flagship institution. It's about the best show in the state, and the best show in the state is the 50,000 student University of Texas at Austin. And from there, 5 years later, I decided to move into faith-based higher education and was able to join one of the 28 Jesuit universities in the United States, the beautiful Santa Clara University in the heart of Silicon Valley, just south of San Francisco. And then from there, 4 years later, because apparently I can't hold down a job, I moved on to the University of California system and joined the #1 surfing school in the United States, the University of California, San Diego. A very different institution from those I've served, because at only 52 years old, it's amazing what was done with what was formerly a military installation north of San Diego. The creation of this world-renowned institution that keeps growing, keeps hitting rankings, and keeps doing better and better and better. So I think about Beloit College. Has anyone heard of Beloit? Well, we're all about branding in the US, and Beloit would be unknown if it weren't for something that they do quite wisely every year. Beloit College produces a mindset list. They welcome in the incoming class of students, and across the United States, it is September when students return for fall semester. This is when they come to school. And Beloit College has just released the mindset list for the class of 2017, the incoming freshmen of today. Tell me if you can relate to any of this. I think you'll find it interesting. Today's incoming students would say that having a chat has seldom involved talking. Today's incoming students would say that Gaga has never been just about baby talk. Today's students would say that a tablet is no longer something that they take in the morning. They'd say that with GPS, they've never really needed directions. And they'd say that their favorite feature films have always been largely, if not totally, computer generated. That's the class of 2017. Welcome. So if I were to connect with the grandparents of these incoming freshmen, they might be able to tell me about what they saw in higher education in the US, because what they saw was a departure of small schools around the United States, the end of World War II, the GI Bill in the United States, and the growth of the middle class. So if we look at the 1940s and 1950s and 1960s in the US, few industries have grown as fast, gained such prestige, and affected the lives of so many people as higher education. Money flowed freely from federal, state, local governments, alumni associations, and families who reached into their savings and took out loans so that their children could enjoy what every American wanted and wants to enjoy, the the American dream. During the last 20 years of the 20th century, universities achieved what we might call a monopoly as licensing agencies for Americans who wanted to improve their employment prospects. Every occupation sought to raise its prestige and income by making college and beyond a requirement for entry. Now, until about the 1980s, our faculty, our academics, ruled, they governed, they reigned in the United States. They were the primary decision makers. They were the heart of our campus communities. But then something changed. Right around the time of the Vietnam War, a consumer culture took hold in the United States. Student services increased. Career development centers started to prosper. Governing boards and administrators, especially those with business backgrounds, not academic credentials, took hold of the campus hierarchy. Student tuition rose well beyond inflation, as did student expectations. It was then, in the 1960s and early 1970s, that we used less the term student and more the term customer. They wanted to be treated well, those student customers, and they wanted to have assurances that their degrees would be valuable in the job market. So what I'd like to share with you rather quickly are 8 trends that I am seeing in the United States right now, and we'll see which of those trends you can relate to here in Australia. I'm a little bit homesick from day to day, and so one of the subscriptions that has become the most treasured morning rituals for me is the Chronicle of Higher Education, the online Chronicle of Higher Education, where I get the scoop, I get the skinny, I get everything that is hot and everything that is not in tertiary education in the United States. Here are some trends that I'm seeing. Number 1, university image, brand, and public relations strategy has never been more important, and it will continue to be more important. Social media sends campus reputations viral. Consumerism has created a culture where we're all chasing happiness to ensure that our students are quite delighted with their campus experiences. And I would note on the slide that you see behind me that ratings are alive and well in the US as they are in Australia. You're looking at images of the recently released US News and World Report top 10 national universities in the United States. University image is especially important because it's not just about bricks and mortar anymore. For-profit institutions such as Bridgepoint Education, DeVry University, and the University of Phoenix are taking hold. They are educating millions of people throughout the United States using methods that we had not dreamed of in traditional campuses until about 5 or 7 years ago. But the university image and brand and public relations is also about the community that we create. I know that when I would have Australian visitors come see me at the University of California, San Diego, they were fascinated by all of the boutique centers we have on campus. The Women's Center and the LGBT Center and the Black Center and the Chicano Student Center, and on it goes of storefronts that you find across campuses in the US designed to ensure a healthy campus climate. Diversity and inclusion are the subject of more meetings on our campuses in the US, I'm quite convinced, than any other topic we can think of. How are we serving our disabled students, our first and family students, our veterans, our underrepresented students, our transfer students, and increasingly in the last 10 years, our international students? Number 2, the future of liberal arts. Wow, there's a lot of writing about that these days. United States higher education is rooted in the liberal arts. It's rooted in ancient Greece and Rome. It helped give birth to the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. It permeated learning in France, England, and Germany, and moved to the United States, and it is the cornerstone, it is the fabric of tertiary education in the US. But With millions of graduates now in the United States wrapping up their college degrees, in debt, and looking for work, they're wondering what the return on that liberal arts investment is. In fact, our own Vice Chancellor Davis just sent me an email along with several other people the other day about yet another New York Times article about the plight of the liberal arts degree in the United States, about the challenges that graduates have in a marketplace where so many do find work, but they find work in areas that did not call for a university degree. Barry Schwartz is a professor of psychology at a beautiful small liberal arts college outside of Philadelphia, Swarthmore, and he writes that college should answer 3 questions. What is worth knowing? What is worth doing? And what makes for a good human life? Today, many are adding a 4th question. What will pay the bills? Number 3, the state of the academic job market. My first job in the early 1990s at the University of Virginia, I was given an exciting assignment that took me way over my head, but I realized how important it was. In the early 90s, we were graduating PhDs in the United States all over the place. And these PhDs had spent many, many years earning their terminal degrees, and they could not find tenure-track positions in the academy. And so, tenure versus adjuncts is another trend that I think we need to look at. Is the traditional tenured faculty that has been part of that foundation of higher education in the US, is that going to be the future when education can be delivered in so many different ways and through more and more part-timers? Number 4, the privatization of the public land-grant university. Raising money has become more and more important in higher education in the United States. Research grants, philanthropic gifts, and corporate partnerships are extremely important. Extension programs, alumni engagement, other mechanisms that bring energy to the campus and bring dollars to the campus are receiving lots and lots of attention. And through all of that, with revenue, there's been a staffing impact through furloughs, layoffs and redundancies, hiring freezes, and the casualization of the workforce, which is a topic that I've heard a little bit about since I arrived in Melbourne. Number 5, the drive for advanced degrees. Perhaps the 4-year undergraduate degree just isn't enough anymore in the United States. And in fact, prestige is attached to successful application to medical school, law school, graduate business school, and research-oriented doctoral programs. The downside of the pursuit of advanced degrees in the United States is the increased debt load, where you have those earning JDs in the US after 3 years of professional school education, looking at a ticket price of $100,000 plus that they will have to pay back within a fixed period of time. Number 6, technology innovation. Do we outsource our technology or do we try to build it within? We're talking constantly about client management systems that are integrated, the notion of cradle to grave, so that we could actually track our clients in a more effective manner. Student portals have become commonplace in the US, and I know that's extremely important at the University of Melbourne as well. And of course, online coursework, MOOCs and beyond. How are we balancing the bricks and mortar, the traditional go away to college sort of institution, the ivy-colored walls? How do we balance that with 24/7 access to coursework that can impact not just 18 to 22-year-olds, but people in all walks of life and at all ages around the country and beyond? Number 7, the internationalization of our campuses. NYU, New York University, just opened its campus in Shanghai just last month, welcoming 300 undergraduate students, 150 from China, 100 from the United States, and 50 from other parts of the world. They will figure out over time how to deliver their educational product in a marketplace that's been unfamiliar. I realize that Carnegie Mellon from Pittsburgh has a campus here in Australia. I also know that exchange and study abroad programs have never been more prominent than they are today. And in the United States, they're becoming increasingly more affordable. The criticism in the US previously about study abroad was, number one, I can't afford it, or number two, I won't be able to graduate on time. Study abroad and exchange programs have become very sophisticated, and they now realize there are ways to give students an international experience and tick off the boxes of affordability and on-time graduation. What I've seen in Australia in my nearly 9 months here is we have more background in Australia with educating undergraduate students from other countries. That's still relatively new and growing in the US, and campuses are scrambling to figure out what services and resources and tools and strategies to provide undergraduate international students so they have the very same rich experience and positive feeling that American counterparts feel. And then finally, I save the best for last. Number 8, return on investment. What am I getting for this degree? Why should I pursue a university or a college degree? Why should I step out of the workplace and go into debt to get educated? What does it mean for me? And so there are a couple of themes that are playing into that. Number one is transparency. There is an incredible push to publish the salaries of university presidents and others like never before. We're fascinated by how much money people make in higher education in the US. In fact, just a few months ago, President Obama, in his State of the Union address, said this: "My administration will release a new, quote, college scorecard that parents and students can use to compare schools based on simple criteria where you can get the most bang for your educational buck." Do you know how terrified that statement makes people in higher education in the United States? There are those that are incredible supporters of it, including the National Governors Association, that would like to keep the economies humming in their states. And so they're looking for opportunities to demonstrate that thanks to their land-grant institutions, their economies thrive, people make money, they buy cars, they buy homes, they get mortgages, and then they send their kids off to college. Along with the return on investment, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the other side of the liberal arts degree. And that's the side that's getting a lot of money, a lot of attention, and a lot of excitement on US campuses. And it comes down to 2 acronyms: STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and FAME, finance, accounting, management, and economics, being the clusters of academic disciplines most likely to lead 18 to 22-year-olds in the US into well-paying jobs where they can pay back those university loans. Parents and families are looking for return on investment. And a recent McKinsey report demonstrated that students often feel in the US that they are overqualified for the jobs they are in after graduation, yet ironically, they feel unprepared for work. That's interesting. And I'm wearing my career hat for just a moment here. There's an awful, awful word that is creeping back into the lexicon of career services in the US, and that word is placement. Placement. Have we placed students? Because that's where the profession got its start. Come into my office, we'll open up a file drawer, I will have things for you to do, ways for you to make money. The US moved away from that model in the 1980s and 1990s, but we believe that P word is coming back and it may be here to stay. And so finally, in closing, at the heart of all of this stuff that I'm rattling on about are university faculty and staff of different generations and motivations drawn to the very special transformative experience that is the college campus. I've been working on university campuses for 25 years. I can't imagine a place I'd rather be. And I think about students' careers as I think about my own. They're aspirational. They're always something that we are reaching for. As an undergraduate business major at Virginia Tech, I studied repeatedly Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Do any of you remember the pyramid? We're all climbing the pyramid, and we are reaching for self-actualization. And that's like our careers. We've never really arrived. We're never at the destination. It's always something that we reach for. And so if we were to gather in this room in 2020, these last three things I'm going to say, I'd probably be saying again. Number one, success in higher education is highly personal. It involves doing, developing skills, building a resume. It involves grit. It involves falling on our faces and picking ourselves up. And it involves something that we're losing, it seems globally, in higher education, and that is the power of unplugging and reflecting. Thinking about what we're doing, thinking about where we've been, and thinking about where we're going. Number two, the focus on first destination surveys, which is all the rage in the US right now, is myopic today, and it will be, dare I say, myopic tomorrow. Because if we look at the university experience, one might argue that it's better to track our graduates 2 and 5 and 10 years after their university degrees to get a real, true sense of the impact those 3 to 4 to 5 to 7 to 10 years actually had on their personal and professional lives. And finally, capstone experiences such as mandatory student portfolios, opportunities for all students to come together before they graduate, to reflect, to plan their strategy, to build their argument, and to pursue their passion, hopefully we'll be closer to realizing those capstone experiences around the US and around the world. So we're not building cars, we're not building consumer goods, we're not building the next generation iPhones. We are, in my view, transforming lives and creating knowledge. Two noble goals that are so hard to measure, but so extremely important in the work that we do. Thank you.